What happened here at the Rail Deck Park could very well determine the quality of city that we're going to get in our future.
Rail Deck Park was a really ambitious proposal that seeked to basically build an urban park on top of the rail corridor. They would have covered over that and created a giant park space in between there, which was being compared to like our Central Park.
It was nixed in favor of another proposal.
Spoiler alert, it involves condos.
On average, there's about 28 square meters of park space per person, enough for like a living room. When it comes to the downtown core, some sources have said 5 square meters per person, some have said 4.
Ouch.
They're selling air, basically.
Yeah. Parkland is something we're going to need forever.
Right.
You build a park, that is forever. We're doing work for people 50, 60, 100 years from now. What do we do about the fact that, once this is built, that's it, it's done, right? And we're running out of places you can feasibly put a park like this, especially in the core. This was arguably, I would say, our last shot. Welcome to Between the Lakes, the podcast about where we live and how we grow here in the GTA. My name is Fahad Rehman. I'm your host. I'm a real estate broker. I'm a court-approved expert witness on real estate matters, and I've spent the last 8 years navigating the GTA in my role as a real estate broker, but also seeing how the region unfolds, learning about cities and the way we build. And this podcast is basically about everything to do with this region here between the lakes. That's where we get our name from. The lakes, of course, being Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Simcoe. At the end of the day, if it affects life in this region, we're going to be talking about it on this podcast. So I'm really pleased to kick off our first episode here. For episode 1, my guest here is Chris Jovellanos. He spent years inside the City of Toronto Planning Department. He worked on development approvals. He worked to try to modernize a system that really badly needed it. And he was right in the middle of one of the most talked about things that has ever happened in this city. Most talked about and quietly gutted, which is Rail Deck Park. So we're going to talk about that, what it was supposed to be, how it got approved, and exactly what happened when the province and the developers got into it. So let's get into it, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, by the way.
Of course, man. Thank you for being here. This is
inaugural
awesome.
Episode.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I appreciate you having me on board. And I think the last time I spoke to you about this, we were in Florida.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Sunny Orlando, right?
Yeah, sunny Orlando. A little different from here, but we were chatting about it, and you were sharing some of the insight that you saw as really an insider to the whole process. And so I think that's something that's very interesting. We're definitely going to talk about that. But before we do, let's get into who you are and your background. You spent years inside the planning department, but to most people, planner, they don't really know what that means. So why don't you tell us what you did, what your days actually looked like, and things like that?
Yeah, so essentially I spent about 10 years at the City of Toronto.
Okay.
I started my career in Toronto Water. Take a step back, basically, I wanted to become a planner. So I went to the University of Waterloo in the School of Planning to get my planning degree, to understand how city building works. And I really wanted to be involved in how to build a city and have some influence and just help develop a community. And then I decided that I figured I want to work in government. So I took my master's in public policy downtown. And I started my career in government and in policymaking. And so I had some stints at the province, at the Ministry of Environment. I worked for Metrolinx for a little bit. I had some experience at TTC. I eventually got the opportunity of basically my dreams, which was to move to get a job into city planning. So I was hired by an amazing manager in a unit inside city planning called Business Performance and Standards. And my role was as a project coordinator. Just for the audience, basically, Business Performance Standards is your oversight unit that focuses on trying to streamline the development review process. It also tries to speed up development review. We do a lot of reporting, KPIs, report to council, and we're sort of the glue team, I guess, to ensure things stick together so that our planners or internal commenting partners we're all moving at a good speed. And so we were essentially I guess you could say the project managers assisting planners in processing applications.
When you're trying to modernize a government process from the inside, what's the actual enemy? Is it the rules? Is it the culture? Is it just the extent of the beast you're dealing with, the people? Like what is it in your opinion?
My personal opinion, based on my experience at the city, not as a planner, but overseeing the process, I believe it's the process itself. The way that it was structured, that hub and spoke model maybe might have worked for a smaller community or back when the City of Toronto was a bit smaller and didn't have the amount of people moving in every year. I think we have about, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think we have at least around 140,000 new people moving into the city every year.
Yeah.
So,
and a whole lot of development. So things have changed.
Right. Things have changed quite a bit.
I guess that process was a little bit dated, which is, I think,
That's right.
kind of a common theme in Canada and Toronto overall is, we used to be this kind of fledgling nation.
Right.
And all of a sudden we got to deal with global levels of growth. And so that adaptation process, I imagine, would take some time. And that definitely requires some process changes as well.
That's right. I think somebody that I worked with, who I looked up to, referred to government or the city as like a big ship, right? It's solid, it works, and it gets people from A to B, and then it does a lot, but it takes a lot to steer that ship. And so that was my experience at the city. Our team was specialized in trying to implement change. And sometimes it worked. Sometimes it took a little bit longer.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into Rail Deck Park. For those who don't know what this was, Rail Deck Park was a really ambitious proposal that seek to basically build an urban park on top of the rail corridor, right? So the rail corridor going from, I believe it was Blue Jays Way down to Bathurst, existing right now. You kind of walk over the bridges and, you just got, you see a bunch of train tracks below you. It would have actually made a fully, they would have covered over that and created a giant park space in between there, which was being compared to our Central Park, right? So a lot of people were a big fan of this. I guess it had support in the city as well. A couple stakeholders coming together, and certainly the public was very much a fan of what Rail Deck Park was going to be and what it could have done for the city. I mean, I'm sure you could imagine having a massive park right there, right in the center, right by the core, near the CN Tower, that would have been huge for us, right? So the proposal came in. A lot of people were in favor of it, and it actually went quite far along, right?
It did.
Yeah, and it got to approval.
It did. It got to approval. Essentially, my experience, I had the privilege of overseeing the development as it developed from 2016 when it was announced by Mayor Tory at the time,
right,
all the way through to 2021. Unfortunately, when it was, it was nixed in favor of another proposal.
Proposal. Spoiler alert: it involves condos.
It does.
Yeah, as a lot
surprise,
surprise. As a lot of things do here. So when council voted 36-4 to advance it in December 2017, from inside the city, what did it feel like? Did people actually believe this was going to happen?
I think so. There was a huge belief. Part of my job was to talk to planners on a daily basis, and we had even a few fun extracurricular activities basically outside of the workplace where we would do trips around what was going to be Rail Deck Park.
Wow.
So we had, access to the rail corridor, just celebrating it as a future win because it was a huge deal from a planning perspective. The city put together OPA, which is the Official Plan Amendment 395, which essentially made the proposal official from the city's perspective.
Yeah, right. And it got overwhelming support, right? Most people in favor of it.
And I'll backtrack as to why this is so important, because I do believe that what happened here at the Rail Deck Park could very well determine the quality of city that we're going to get in our future.
Right.
It is
for
such
everybody,
a critical
right?
decision
for millions of people, and that affects life forever.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'll go back to why this is so needed, especially in the city of Toronto, based on what I've seen and what I've experienced around North America. But basically, I believe there was a study in 2020. It was a spacings, not a study, sorry. It was a spacings article, I believe, that tried to understand just how much park space we actually need, how much do we have.
Right.
And I think across the city, on average, there's about 28 square meters of park space per person. So you can imagine 28 square meters is enough for a living room on average. You have a little living room. Yeah. Every person has a little living room, maybe a studio condo or something of park space to enjoy, which is great. When it comes to the downtown core, however, that amount of park space per person declined significantly. Some sources have said 5 square meters per person. Some have said 4.
Wow.
Some have even said it's as low as 0.16 to 1.3 or 1.4.
Right.
So I might have gotten the stats wrong, but it still points to a significant issue that we have at the city, especially when you account for workers working in the downtown core.
Right. And in downtown, you arguably need it more than anyone else, right? You don't really have backyards, and people obviously thrive in green space, and that's something that all great cities in the world have paid a lot of attention to. Of course, you got like the New York model where they almost like started with it in a way, right? Carved it out, specifically, and so that's really interesting.
Yeah, and some cities have followed that path in prioritizing public space or even reserving public space throughout, not allowing any development happen. I mean, Chicago is a perfect example. Mm-hmm. You have Millennium Park as well. It's part of, I believe it's called Grant Park, which is a much bigger, we're talking 300 plus hectares of land, of park space, right? Wow. New York, you have a significant amount of hectares in Chicago, and Millennium Park that's purpose built for the enjoyment of people to have a picnic, to go out and relax and enjoy the outdoors.
Yeah.
You have Manhattan. You have Central Park in Manhattan. I spent a few years living in New York, and
it's massive, right? And people use this stuff, and obviously here in the city too. Whether you want to look at Trinity Bellwoods or even Queens Park, like you go to all of our parks in the summer, they're a little cramped. It's a little busy, and I don't blame people because hey, having a drink at the park, that's a great pastime. It feels great in our beautiful summers. So it makes sense that this was something that was not only just needed, but also very much supported by people in the city and very much supported by the public. Like, I don't think I've seen something get this much support from the general public since.
Exactly.
Right?
And because of what you said, it was much needed. Queens Quay could have had a ton of potential. Queens Quay, or that whole waterfront area, that corridor, when we're rewinding back in history, it used to be industrial lands. But then the city, I believe in the 70s, had some developers start developing condos. It was also a great source of development charges, so a great source of income for the city to help them balance the budgets and generate more revenue for the city. And so more and more developers started developing on that open swath of land that used to be for industrial and port land purposes or port purposes.
Right. And that's how we get our kind of our building heavy and condo heavy waterfront there, which, gets some critique in the public space.
Yeah. Do you ever notice that Queens Quay, it's all high rises or mid rises right at the water?
Yeah, right? That's right. That's right.
It's so unique compared to some of the other cities we see, like Chicago, that have a dedicated waterfront.
Yeah, and you kind of ease out into a more flat, natural landscape going to the water.
I believe at the time it was justified, especially because the city is growing back in the 70s, and you need additional sources of revenue, a higher tax base. So why not have developers redevelop that land under the city's watch?
Right.
And so that continued to happen. I believe there was some resistance in the 80s, a pushback to try to reserve some of this land for public enjoyment. But ultimately, I think, politically, the developers had their way. And thankfully, Waterfront Toronto was introduced in 2001. I believe that was the year they were introduced. And they've really done a phenomenal job at trying to beautify the space and install more park space along the waterfront corridor. So they have, you have the wave decks, you have the new park over by the Donlands. They've revitalized the Don River.
One. Yeah, for sure.
So that in a few years, once the vegetation grows, it's just going to be gorgeous.
Yeah, totally.
You have the Sugar Beach there.
Yeah,
right. And so Waterfront Toronto has done a great job with the land that they have available, but it still points to the root of the issue. There's a source problem there. There's just not enough dedicated space, similar to what you see in New York, whereas a Central Park, somewhere where people can escape from the hustle and bustle of Bay Street, for example, or the hustle and bustle of like living in a high density condo, and escape for a little bit and hear, birds chirping, trees, relax, have a picnic, socialize. Nothing of the scale like a Central Park. I mean, this is why Real Deck Park was so important, because it proposed, I believe it was 21 hectares of parkland space, which is huge compared to what we see in Toronto. I think the closest comparables may be Trinity Bellwoods, and then you go further west, and then you have High Park. High Park is probably one of the few parklands where you can have that peaceful enjoyment of space and be teleported to nature.
Little nature reserve within the city, but you don't really have that closer to the core. And so that's kind of what this was going to be. So let's go through what happens. So basically, it gets proposed by Mayor Tory, comes to council, they vote to approve it, and now it's like, okay, this might actually happen. Okay, so when things are going good, that's understood. Everyone's behind it. What was the first hitch you guys encountered, and how did things start to kind of fall apart with this vision?
So, from what I understand, based on my time at the city, there was a competing proposal for that space. So, if you look at from an overhead view, the city of Toronto is essentially bisected by not just the Gardiner Expressway, but also the rail corridor, which is a vital transportation corridor.
Right.
This is where we transport sometimes goods, but a lot of people, you've seen the GO train and everything like that. It's very crucial for the city of Toronto economically, but it's also an open pit, right? So there's one concept that came up that I wasn't aware of at the time that was introduced to me. It's the idea of air rights. And so I believe it was 2013, around that time, certain companies or corporations, they purchased the air rights above the rail corridor. So I don't want to name some of those companies, but
yeah, it was a consortium, right?
It was a consortium. Part of it was a consortium.
Yeah,
that's right. And there was a proposal alternative to the rail deck park, which was essentially proposing a multi-condo high-rise development above rail deck park with park space integrated in between. So think about something like the Hudson Yards in New York. Have you ever been in the Hudson Yards?
Yeah, I have. It's great. It's a nice development, right? And great buildings, and got some public space in the middle.
Yeah,
but a little different than like
it's very different.
Sprawling public park. It definitely feels more urban.
It's very urban,
and so it would have been something more along that lines. Yeah. And I guess because they had the air rights, that's what they were pushing for. And can you actually explain a little bit about air rights? So how does that work in the city of Toronto?
So you could purchase not just the land on the ground, but you can actually purchase the space above that land, especially when it comes to a place like the rail corridor. It's a good opportunity for the city to make revenue, or government, whoever owns that piece of land, to make revenue. They're selling air, basically. And so you can purchase stratified layers of that air, depending how high you go. And that was a critical piece as to why the rail deck project essentially failed. Basically, we had a consortium owning different air rights.
Yeah. And sorry, would they have purchased those from, I guess, CN Rail, who owns the corridor?
I don't know the exact owner who owned it. I'm assuming it might have been CN Rail who decided to sell the air rights.
Right.
But what we had at the rail deck project, the rail deck park, was you had approval, but not approval on the air, right?
Got it.
You had approval you had a vision to develop a park, but unfortunately didn't own the land or the space required for that rail deck park. And so there were solutions proposed for that. And that was could have been through expropriation,
right? Which
is, essentially purchasing the land through a different process. Or, buying it outright. That would have cost quite a bit of money. I believe the cost originally for the rail deck park was going to be around $1 billion, but I think that was upgraded to around 1.6 to 1.7 billion. And I believe a portion of that part of it was to be for purchasing. And how would you get that money, right? So funding was also a big issue.
Yeah, as it often is with the city. And I think that's part of the issue is we're talking about a project of such a grand scale.
Right.
But cities are very limited in the way they can, raise and spend money. It's not like it's the federal government where, you can issue bonds, or the province where you could just, we're just going to borrow a couple billion. It's always tighter for the city. And so I think that was a big part of it. I think if you look at kind of what went wrong, you could definitely argue that, had there been better coordination around the financial element of it, at the end of the day, you need money to make this kind of stuff happen. And as we've seen with the city, whether it's the Gardiner Expressway kind of falling into disrepair, or the fact that it was eventually uploaded to the province, like funding is an issue. And if you're relying on property taxes, like it's hard. How many property taxes do you have to raise to fund a $1.5 billion, probably $3 billion by the time it's done, $1 billion park?
Probably.
Yeah.
There were a few solutions to figure out funding.
Okay.
What I mentioned was some of them. I think the biggest one would have been development charges for the surrounding growth. They call it cash in lieu of parkland. and stronger parkland dedication rules. So you basically get cash from developers or to try to fund parkland in lieu of you building a park on your proposal, like downtown. Let's say it's a condo. Instead, in lieu of building a park there, you pay the city cash.
Right, and they can kind of pool it. And then put it into something.
And so
bigger.
there was quite a bit of funds there in those funds.
Right.
Potentially getting the federal and provincial government to come forward with additional funding, but also potential sponsorships around the area, getting the community around Rail Deck Park to contribute, especially because everybody would benefit from a dedicated park space, 21 hectares of park space.
Right.
It basically connected north to south of Toronto. So it's connecting essentially Citygate to Front Street. And so you would have a continuous, walkable space where you can
would have
relax.
Been amazing. Would have been amazing.
Dedicated park space. And so there were solutions identified, but I believe it wasn't enough to convince the tribunal that this was a viable solution. So ultimately, the province sided with the developers. So the developer proposal, it was multiple condominium high-rises with parks in between.
Right.
So I believe,
so basically still build on top of the rail corridor. You still get a little bit of public space as you navigate it, but you're talking like condo towers and stuff like that.
So the last time, I think the last figure I remembered was it was about 11 hectares of parkland.
Cutting it in half.
We all know that park space could be plazas in between the buildings, might not necessarily be lawn space, whereas the Rail Deck Park was proposing for dedicated lawn space. It was dedicated community gathering areas, play spaces.
Yeah.
And so when you have high-rise condominium buildings,
it's just not the same.
It's not the same. It's not the same.
So the city actually went ahead and they went public with this. They gave it the approval. They altered the official plan, and they're saying, okay, we're going to do this. But I guess they hadn't locked down the air rights first, and that was a critical part of it. So it sounds like at the end of the day, the failure might have come from the fact that it wasn't coordinated with all the necessary bodies, whether you got CN Rail, the owners of the air rights, and then also, obviously, those air right owners obviously were pushing for the condo version because without it, the air is worth nothing, right? It's if you don't,
that's a fair point.
If you don't use it, it's worth almost nothing. So it's interesting how that all played out. But let's talk about when the developers kind of showed up. When it went to the tribunal, I believe it was 2021. Went to the tribunal.
When the decision was made.
Yes, and so what happened when the developers showed up? What were they essentially advocating for, and what was their argument?
The alternative proposal for the Rail Deck Park, like I mentioned, incorporated adding housing supply, which was a huge that's a huge focus for the province, especially to increase housing supply through increasing density in the city of Toronto. And so when you have proposals that increase housing supply, I think that was a critical decision point versus a Rail Deck Park that added no additional housing. So one of the main reasons for overturning that Rail Deck or for siding with the development proposal was that it did add additional housing supply to the city of Toronto, which is much needed on a provincial level.
Right.
But when you think about it this way, as realtors, you and I, we work with clients every day. We work with buyers and sellers. But in my experience, when you fast forward to today, the condo market is where it is because people don't want to live in a cramped space. They don't want to live in a sub 500 square foot unit. And even if you have 2 bedrooms, for example, we're seeing units now where the second bedroom's inside the unit. You don't have a real window.
No window, yeah.
Right. So it's a bit like a terrarium.
Yeah.
Like
and it's like, how much of that do you need? Arguably right now we're oversupplied with that.
Right.
Right. And that's why the condo market is kind of doing what it is. So
right.
I would say that's probably a bit of a lack of foresight, right? Is to saying, okay, yes, we have this problem right now where we need housing supply right now, but parkland is something we're going to need forever.
Right.
You build a park, that is forever. We're doing work for people 50, 60, 100 years from now, right? Who will look back and see this as a very critical decision. So yeah, I definitely see how that was a big part of it.
But I do understand where the province is coming from when it comes to aligning with their housing goals. Especially, there's so much opportunity here. I believe they proposed to add at least 3,000 units to the rear quarter area,
and
which
again,
is much needed.
To kind of play the other side of it, that's very central. It's all on transit lines. Like it is obviously a good place for housing. So yeah, I guess those two sides were kind of going at it with each other.
Right.
One of the things that the tribunal said in 2021 was that the city didn't move fast enough on its own park plan. Do you think that's a fair criticism? Did the city fumble it, or was that just a convenient justification to kind of greenlight this development proposal instead?
I think there were a lot of benefits. Looking at it from the provincial perspective, I think there were a lot of immediate benefits to the developer proposal, mostly from the perspective of housing, for adding housing supply. The city had their OPA. They were ready to move ahead into more additional steps to potentially begin construction within the next couple of years after that. Although this was probably going to be a 10-year project. Mostly phased, right? You might be able to enjoy in a few years, right, the beginnings of a rail deck park space, and then over the years you have it fully developed into a complete park space, right? So from the perspective of the city taking too long, I don't know. I think timing was an issue, but I think the crux of it was the city just didn't own the air rights that they needed to be able to implement something like a rail deck park. There was a possibility, though, to purchase those air rights for top dollar.
Right.
But
you
I
got to
don't
compete with the millions of dollars they would have made if they build them out.
probably wouldn't compare to the money that you could have if you were to develop a condominium.
Yeah, totally.
Those
And I imagine for the province too, and everyone, it's just a much more easy funding model where it's like, okay, well, sure, if they build their towers, then they can pay for the park, and you know, we can build it all together. And
from a funding perspective, it makes absolute sense because you have, similar to what I was describing with Queens Quay and how the city encouraged developers to redevelop those open swaths of land. Same pattern here. It's why not have the developer pay for this rail deck park primarily, right? There are partnerships. The developers are probably partnering with provincial bodies like Metrolinx because Metrolinx has a big role, especially on the rail corridor. So there will be provincial and federal, most likely will be federal and provincial funding involved to have this done in some capacity. But I think for the most part, the developer is covering the bill.
Yeah, with a significantly reduced amount of park space. So I believe right now it is called Rail Deck District. I think 9 towers, up to 72 stories in that corridor. And the park space is significantly reduced. It's only a fraction of what it used to be. For the public, for people who love this project, people who wanted to see it go through, how do you process that shift? Like how can we make sense of this? And what do we do about the fact that, like once this is built, that's it, it's done, right? And we're running out of places you can feasibly put a park like this, especially in the core. This was arguably, I would say, our last shot.
I agree. I think this was our last shot to have a legacy project in the city of Toronto that would meaningfully add real park space in the center of the city. We have great park spaces throughout. The city has done a great job of rezoning or reallocating open space and open land in the core for park space. It doesn't compare to what a central park model would have been like for the city. Of course, not the same scale of a central park, but the same purpose where you can actually enjoy the open space and escape away from the city. So in terms of how to deal with this for somebody who lives in the city of Toronto or works in the city, I really hope that there is some meaningful conversations with developers as they are working with the city now to develop an urban space. That I hope that they are designing meaningful park space that, I guess, in spirit would achieve what the Rail Deck Park was trying to do. At the same time, I also hope that the units that are being built or designed for these towers, I hope they're bigger spaces, more family oriented. I think that was the biggest benefit of Rail Deck Park, is that in order to develop a family oriented, livable space, you also have to build the park space needed for that.
Right.
And so I really hope that that's taken into account once the designs are finalized for this and they eventually start start building it out.
Right. Would you say right now, like, is it going to move forward like this? Like, obviously, they're subject to approvals and applications, but is the original vision dead at this point?
I would never say it's over, but I think right now the focus is on developers working with government and the city to develop a solution that actually adds some meaningful park space. So I think there is a happy path forward where there will be some benefit. Actually, a lot of benefit to a development, even like this, with Rail Deck Park being replaced with this developer proposal. I think you're going to have some really nice, meaningful spaces there, maybe for gathering.
Right.
Maybe it might be a bit more urban, but I do think it's better than it being an open rail corridor.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
and I think that's a fair point. If you compare it to what it is now, I think it'll definitely still be good, but. What it could have been. I think that's something that I think we'll all probably mourn. And obviously, I guess in theory, because the province runs everything. Like, if you had the political will, you could probably turn this thing around. But that brings me to my next question: is whether it's now at this stage or back then, what do you think would actually have to be done to actually get something like this off the ground, away from the proposals and into, yes, we are doing this and we're building it? What would you actually have to do? Because I think that can be a lesson for future proposals that come by.
Well, I think there has to be a concerted effort to rally citizens of Toronto, to bring them together, to actually push for an alternative again, to request for the province to reconsider the LPAT decision. I believe that that's a legally binding decision. So we'll have to review what that looks like. How do you overturn a decision like that? I'm not sure what
right. So maybe it starts with public, the public has to kind of steer themselves that way. That's hey, if you're watching this and you want the original Rail Deck Park back, which by the way, I'm with you.
Right.
I think we should put our voices together and try to make this happen. I mean, yes, the towers version, it makes more financial sense, but you have to sacrifice sometimes, I think. And I think if you look back at whether it's Millennium Park in Chicago or Central Park or any of the real meaningful decisions that were made to create these public spaces, like, yes, of course, there was a more financially feasible proposal out there, but they took the sacrifice, they put public needs first, and they did something that maybe didn't make financial sense at the time, or maybe it was expensive. It was always expensive. But something like this is just like, you can't go back on it, like we were saying. And so I think,
exactly.
When I look back in the past, our past is full of people, I think, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s who were city builders, who were visionaries, who were thinking about the future and not necessarily about like the pocketbook right now. And I think it'd be so great to be able to get back to that right now. And I think, like, I understand why we kind of lean more towards this, like, hey, the developers will pay for it and build it, and things will get done quicker. It makes a lot more efficient sense. But from a long-term perspective, like, we need that level of vision that to build stuff like this. And I commend Mayor Tory and like whoever was involved at the city at the time of actually getting this off the ground. But I agree. I guess a more concerted effort with the province, with the federal government, to move the needle, do what you have to do, and do something that we're actually going to benefit from for the next 100 years.
I think in terms of timing, there is potentially an opportunity for this maybe to be resurrected. Could be through this development. I mean, now that the real estate market is what it is, especially for downtown condos.
That's a good point.
There's less of a business case to develop these high-rise buildings.
Because they're not even going to sell.
People aren't buying them. We're at near record high inventory numbers. As realtors, we see that.
Right. And to kind of fill in the audience on this matter too, pricing has come down, but the cost of construction hasn't really come down.
Right.
They've recently made something with the HST and the development charges to bring that cost down. But even still, like, if you're running a new development right now, you'll struggle to sell that, right? And hit that 80% you need to construct. So maybe this is the moment that we are actually in need of, where we can reconsider this and say, okay, the value prop is no longer there for the condos.
Right.
Let's do something different. And maybe, hey, this actually might be another good time to buy those air rights from the developers, because they can sell low. They might need some money,
knows,
right? And do it. So maybe I'm a dreamer here, but I'm thinking.
I am too. I agree. I'm
thinking it might be a good time to push and get that done.
I mean, I've been away from the city since 2023 and government in general. I pivoted to full-time real estate in 2023. And so I have been away from the conversation and how things are going right now. But you never know. There might be an opportunity to maybe redesign the space to be a bit less dense.
Right.
To maybe reduce some of those towers and increase the parkland.
I think even that could be like a little midway, meet in the middle kind of solution where maybe it's not dedicated park space, but you add some like little commercial things there, like somewhere that you can get funding from as well. Maybe that's a good in between.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's say people listening to this, they're fired up about a potential rail deck park, or they want to see more park space in the city. What do they do? How do they get involved? How do they actually make their voices heard and try to steer this ship in the right direction?
Well, I think the first thing is contact your local councillor, because the councillor is going to be involved in anything happening within their ward or district. Councillors, in my experience, are more than happy to have the public involved and have their say, but also very excited about any new project that's going to be happening. And during my time at the city, they would try to send out leaflets or mail outs to owners within that district to come and participate in project proposals and community consultation sessions. So there are multiple opportunities to give to have your say and give your opinion on future development. There are so many opportunities. Even you can go to a council meeting or a community council meeting and have your say and give your opinion on a development or even a specific proposal in your neighborhood.
Right.
So
I think I've heard that just back of the napkin math, but it's like for every 1,000 people that feel a certain way about something, maybe one person will go forward and say something. But there is actually a forum for this stuff. Like, you can make your voice heard. You just got to go through the process of reading the minutes and the books and the that's a part of it. On one hand, I definitely agree with the fact that there are forums and things in place where people can make their voices heard. One of the things I've also seen, both myself and talking to people who've, let's say, been involved in the city, or as citizens for 10, 20, 30 years, older folks, is they talk about this moving of the goalposts, right? Where it's like, for example, like, yay, we're going to do a park. Just kidding, we're going to do half a park and this. Just kidding, the final version. And it just kind of slides and the goalposts move. And so what's initially proposed to get their foot in the door is not always how it ends up. And of course, there's some level of change and adaptation that's going to happen through the process. But how do we prevent that moving of the goalpost, do you think? Is there any way that we can actually do that?
I think a lot of it has to do with political cycle. I'm not saying this is the reason for all of moving the goalposts every time, but I think politicians and councillors, and you can discuss this on the provincial level as well, even federal, that councillors are only there for a limited amount of time before they have to rerun. Right. And so if your constituents are, in favor of something, but it's a multi-year project that spans beyond your quote unquote political cycle, there's a risk of that falling apart with the change of the guard or a new councillor coming in. And so I do believe there needs to be hopefully a better effort at the community level to keep these councillors or whoever comes into power decision-making positions, to keep them accountable, to ensure that initiatives that were highly favored at the time continue to get implemented.
Yeah, totally. It's one of the things, obviously, we are thankful for our democracy and the fact that we have elections, but it's something that plagues, I think, governments at all levels. And you see this kind of zigzag pattern often, or something gets started and it gets changed. So I guess, to your point, I think a very, important part of that, obviously, we look to politicians to do what's good for us. But I think there's also responsibility that comes onto us to say, if enough people were to like say, hey, listen, this is something we want. Like, we want to continue with this. I think their onus is also on us, the citizens, the people, to hold them to that account and to make that clear to them. That's one way to kind of ensure this continuity, I think.
I think so.
Before we wrap up, we've been talking a lot about your time at the city.
Right.
But one day came and you decided to leave.
I did.
Talk to me about that decision. What was the thing that made you decide that the inside track in government was not the right place for you?
So going back to what I wanted to be, I was a huge SimCity nerd. I wanted to be involved in city building.
This is where it all starts, guys.
It's where it all starts from video games, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So essentially, I wanted to be a planner. And I quickly realized at the city, when I joined, I didn't necessarily want to be that anymore, because as amazing as that career is, it's really in the weeds. It's a long grind. There's a lot of work involved in areas that I wasn't, totally gung ho about. I think for me, I was more interested in the project management side of things, the oversight piece, and building more efficient processes through technology. I'm a huge tech geek. So when there was an opportunity to join city planning from that angle, I was so happy, and it was a career, I think, a dream career for me. But over time, as I was in the city and in government, I decided to get my real estate license in 2017, part-time. And over time, I started to like that job a bit more.
Yeah.
And I so slowly over the years realized that I felt more fulfilled helping family and friends, or helping people find their first home, or upgrade from a condo to a big house or a farm. And I really got more out of that. And I wanted to, there were so many years where my wife and I were discussing, is this the time to leave? Is this the time to leave and jump ship and move into a different career? I mean, I'm in my late 30s now. So at the time I was thinking I only have a few hustle years left, I guess you can call it. But basically what happened is COVID hit, and that really introduced a lot of different perspective. I went on paternity leave. I had my daughter in New York City. So she's half American, half Canadian. And there was a lot of remote work, but it was also a time during paternity leave to really evaluate where I'm at, what I want to look for in a career, and what fulfills me, especially for the next, 10, 20 years, working before you ideally want to retire.
Right.
So after paternity leave, I made the decision. I thought, if there's any time to do it, it's now. And so I basically called up the manager at the time, and I told her, I said, I'm not coming back.
Oh, man.
And so
you're the opposite of the Wolf of Wall Street guy.
Right.
It's
and
like, I am leaving.
I'm leaving, right?
Yeah.
And it's a huge risk, because I worked my whole life to work in government. And I was so lucky to be able to have these job opportunities. And some people would say it's a stupid decision, because I gave up, great pay, great benefits,
stability, all that stuff.
Stability. Yeah. I joined the city at a time when I would have been qualified for, they call it Freedom 55. So when you turn 55 years old, you're eligible to retire, no penalty.
Yeah.
You get cash for life, basically.
Right.
That was the promise, right? And so some people with a different perspective thought I was an idiot for basically leaving all of that. And I decided to quit, and I went all in. I honestly thought this was going to be a 1-year experiment, because I thought, if I fall flat on my face, at least I can go on my knees, hands and knees, like begging to come back, right? Because I do feel for my colleagues at the city. I think they were anticipating me to come back.
But at the end of the day, I guess your heart was more aligned with that more direct people service role.
I wanted to be on the ground with end users,
right?
People who wanted to realize their dream of owning a home, but also identify, okay, I'm a first-time home buyer. Where could I buy? What are some up-and-coming communities to look forward to? And that is where I found intersection with my planning experience and like policy experience,
right?
And research.
You kind of got to see both sides of it, right? Behind the scenes, how it all works, and then go deal with the end users and help them.
And so
help them figure that all out.
Exactly. And where I found a lot of passion, I love doing to this day, is looking through council documents, meeting minutes, proposals, staff reports, and getting a preview of what a community is going to look like in 5, 10, 20 years, and relaying that to my clients.
Yeah, I guess you're that kind of that conduit, right? That can kind of help bridge that gap, and that's definitely a meaningful role. So
yeah, and saying with some degree of confidence that you could say, you're not just buying this house because it looks nice today, but in about 5, 10 years, there's a proposal for a park, or there's a shopping mall proposed down the road that you might enjoy right now, where it's just farmland, for example. Or a rapid transit project that's proposed in your area. So land values hopefully will go up, or you'll be able to enjoy the community a bit more.
Yeah.
And so now that I've been full time for a few years, I don't think I'll go back. I don't think I would. 2025 was my best year in real estate.
Nice.
So
Congrats.
me 5 years ago, that would have been just a dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Congratulations, man. It's
Yeah.
good to
Thank
see
you.
the
Thank you.
evolution. And yeah, this has been great. Chris, thank you so much. Guys, next week, we have a very important guest here on the podcast. I'm really excited to get into it. You'll have to stay tuned to see that. So if you like what you see here, if you want to learn more about the way things evolve in this city, and guys, we're going to get into it all. Okay. We're going to talk, we talked about planning today. We're going to be talking to a lot of people who are directly involved in the city. Again, if it matters to life here between the lakes, if it affects where we live and how we grow, we're going to talk about it here on the Between the Lakes podcast. This has been your very first episode. Thank you to anyone who watched this far or listened this far. You can get it anywhere that podcasts are. So I look forward to being back here with you, and I look forward to embarking on this journey. Thank you, Chris, for being the first guest on
It's an
Between the
honor.
Lakes. Yeah.
Thank you,
yeah,
guys.
man. All right. Signing off.
See ya.